Picture the coldest night you've ever survived. Now subtract 40 more degrees. No heater. No car. No walls. That was an ordinary Tuesday for a human being roughly 40,000 years ago, somewhere on the open plains of Ice Age Europe. And here's the part that should genuinely bother you. That same environment killed off woolly rhinos, cave bears, and eventually the Neanderthals, a species built for cold in ways we weren't. So why are you here? Why did a soft, hairless, tropical primate walk out of that winter alive, generation after generation, while bigger, tougher animals didn't make it? The answer has almost nothing to do with toughness. It has everything to do with a handful of quiet inventions that most people have never even heard of. Let's start with the one nobody expects. A needle. Not fire. Not a spear. A needle made from a splinter of bone with a hole punched through one end. Archaeologists find these things at sites roughly 40,000 years old, and their existence changes the entire story. Before that needle, humans wore hides the way you'd wear a bedsheet, draped loosely over the body, tied here and there, full of gaps. That setup works fine down to maybe -10. It does absolutely nothing for you at -40. Wind finds every gap. Heat pours out through every loose fold. You'd be dead of hypothermia in a matter of hours. But once a human being could actually sew, everything changed. Tight-fitting sleeves, layered insulation, one layer trapping warm air, another blocking wind, a third shedding moisture. That is, structurally, the exact same logic your winter jacket uses right now, whether you realize it or not. And here's the detail that should stop you cold. Neanderthals, despite living in Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years, never developed eyed needles. They wrapped themselves in hides. That's it. That's as far as their technology went. It's not the whole explanation for why they eventually disappeared while we didn't. But it is one piece of a puzzle nobody expected a bone splinter to solve. Now let's talk about fire, because everyone assumes fire's job was simply warmth. And that assumption is only about a third correct. Fire cooked food, and cooked food delivers dramatically more usable calories than raw food, which mattered enormously when your entire body was burning extra fuel around the clock, just to maintain its core temperature. Fire kept predators at bay, because every hungry animal on that frozen plain was also hunting for warmth. And sometimes that warmth was you. And fire produced light through nights that, at high latitudes in winter, stretched past 16 hours of total darkness. 16 hours where you're either sitting frozen and idle, or you're using firelight to sharpen tools, repair clothing, and keep a group functioning as a unit. One of those options keeps a population alive across 100 generations. The other doesn't. Here's something that surprises most people. These fires weren't being restarted from scratch every single day. Archaeological hearths show continuous use stretching across generations, meaning entire communities organize themselves around the responsibility of keeping one flame alive, rather than lighting a new one each morning. Why does that matter so much? Because starting fire without matches, using friction or sparks alone, is slow, unreliable, and sometimes flatly impossible in a blizzard. So Ice Age humans didn't rely on starting fires. They relied on never letting them go out. Shelters where the story gets genuinely strange. Because the popular image of a caveman huddled in a rocky cave is mostly wrong. There simply weren't enough caves on the open tundra to house every group that needed one. So people built. In what is now Ukraine, archaeologists uncovered structures made almost entirely from mammoth bone. Dozens of skulls, tusks, and leg bones arranged into a dome-shaped frame. likely stretched over with hide for insulation. Picture that for a second. An entire dwelling built from the skeleton of the largest land animal on the continent. Because on a treeless, frozen plain, bone was simply the biggest building material available. These weren't crude, improvised huts either. Many were partially dug into the ground, using frozen earth itself as a wind barrier. A design choice that required real planning, not desperation. This was engineering, built from whatever the environment was willing to hand over. But here's the part of the story that almost never makes it into the popular version. And it might be the most important piece of all. The biggest survival tool wasn't physical at all. It was other people, specifically, people who weren't in your immediate group. Ice Age humans typically lived in small bands, maybe 25 individuals, sometimes fewer. A group that size cannot survive a truly bad year alone. One failed hunting season, one outbreak of illness, one winter that runs longer than expected, and a group of 25 can collapse entirely. So these small bands stayed connected to other small bands, sometimes hundreds of kilometers away, through marriage, trade, and shared ceremony. If your local hunting failed, you had somewhere to go. If your group's numbers dropped too low to be viable, you had allies to marry into. Groups that stayed isolated, that never built those wider networks, were disproportionately the ones that vanished from the archaeological record entirely. In other words, in the harshest winters our species has ever faced. The size of your social network may have mattered every bit as much as the size of your fire. So here's the picture that actually emerges once you put all of this together. It isn't a picture of humans barely scraping by through sheer stubbornness. It's a picture of a species that engineered its way through one of the most punishing climates this planet has ever produced. A needle that turned loose hide into a sealed, layered shell. A flame that was never allowed to die. A house built from the bones of the animal it once hunted. A web of alliances stretching past the horizon, invisible, but load-bearing in every sense that mattered. None of it was luck. Every single piece solved a specific deadly problem that should have ended us the same way it ended the mammoths, the cave bears, and eventually, the Neanderthals themselves. And that raises an uncomfortable question worth sitting with. If we were engineering our way around every threat this well, why did the average person back then still die around the age of 35? That's a different problem entirely, and it's one worth understanding next.